Hey everyone, Wandering Bard here, and today I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is a classic from the mid-90s produced by Square Enix, who I know better as the creators of the Final Fantasy series. But Chrono Trigger wasn't trying to be Final Fantasy. It made a big name for itself on its own. It takes a group of unlikely heroes and throws them into a journey across time, as they attempt to understand the past in order to save the future. For me, it was a game that I heard about through its music, and I never heard a single bad thing about it from anyone. So, after I built this PC of mine, I realized that, hey, now I can play this. So, I did. And now that my playthrough has been uploaded to YouTube, I wanted to give you my thoughts on the game. Please remember to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more like it, and as always, this whole thing is my own opinion. If you have a different one, please drop it in the comments. I only ask that you be respectful in providing that opinion, as I'm trying to be respectful to all of you. In other words, don't be like this Chancellor here, forcing his beliefs on people without letting them have any voice. What kind of sicko does that? So, first thing we've got to talk about is the time travel. Time travel is a bit of a peeve of mine when it comes to fantasy. I enjoy stories with time travel, but I don't always like the way the subject is handled. I'll likely make another video detailing my time travel rants at some point, but for now, I will say that I do like the way it's done in Chrono Trigger. Probably my only complaint about it is the end of time, the place that eventually serves as a nexus for all the time gates. The concept itself isn't the problem, but for most of the game, it's mainly used as a way to prevent more than 3 people from being in the party, which feels too much like a game mechanic and less like a plot mechanic. But the concept of time gates is interesting, especially as the game goes on and we get some answers about why the gates appeared and why Marle's pendant reacted to one the way it did in the very beginning of the game. The way that truth is slowly revealed about time travel is also, in my opinion, a masterful example of storytelling. The way details are filled in over time when they need to be, and the growing realization that time was already altered long before we became involved in this adventure is incredibly well done. The time travel is also beneficial to the world building. The world of Chrono Trigger is, from a geographical standpoint, quite small, but being able to travel across time adds a much greater variety of tone and setting that wouldn't normally be plausible. We get a glimpse of how the world has changed across history without the tone changes feeling jarring, or seeing any inconsistencies across the timeline, which I very much appreciate. Another benefit of time travel in this story is the diverse cast of characters. It starts with 3 people from the present day, as it was, but as the plot progresses we get to pick up some allies from both past and future. One consequence of the game taking place almost entirely in the past, though, is that some characters like Luca and Robo don't see much development during the main story, since most of the plot events don't concern them specifically. But other characters were well developed and incredibly sympathetic. Frog's backstory in particular broke my heart to witness, and seeing him grow into himself and his position as a knight was very sweet. And I genuinely liked all of the main characters, even the ones I didn't get to see develop much, which isn't very common in stories for me these days. The only thing I regret is that Chrono, despite being the main character, has no dialogue, and no personality outside game art and occasional cutscenes. I feel like he's meant to be a self-insert like Link from the Zelda series, but the reason that works well for Link and not Chrono is that Link is the only playable character in most Zelda games. In a game like Chrono Trigger, where we see interactions between multiple playable characters, having Chrono be the only one with no dialogue is a lot more awkward. The plot of this game really caught me by surprise. The initial sequences weren't really building up to much, it was mainly us discovering time travel by accident and then dealing with the aftermath. I was not prepared for us to stumble through time into a post-apocalyptic wasteland and be told, hey, this is your future! But they did an amazing job portraying how hopeless and bleak that future truly was. As I previously said, I think the rest of the plot was a masterclass in revealing truth as we sort through the origins of Lavos and time travel. I think the scale of Lavos as a villain feels odd though. Even for our heroes, the notion of fighting an apocalypse monster feels unbelievable for most of the game, so the plot primarily centers around preventing Lavos' coming. Only when that becomes impossible do we fight him, which seems fitting, but it does mean that our main antagonists are people like Magus and the Queen of Zeal for most of the game, and only Magus has particular development as a character. The story evolves as it goes, which is nice, but for a while we're not really sure what it's building up to. We don't know whether Lavos will actually be the main villain or not, so we can't build up an expectation for what's coming. When evaluating the graphics and music, we have to remember this game was produced in 1995 for the SNES. So the graphics are actually decent in that the characters and scenes are well drawn and have personality, but they obviously aren't the stunning visuals we're used to today. The soundtrack is beautifully written, which is amazing given how much Yasunori Mitsuda went through trying to finish, and in some cases, most notably in the Theme Lord's Keep, I think the use of MIDI sounds is actually beneficial to the ambiance they needed to create. Also, I know I might not seem like it given that I started streaming with Final Fantasy XIII, but I am a sucker for nostalgia, so none of this is a problem for me. I really like the tone that they established with this game, and again, weaving together a world across history without making the jumps in time feel jarring is quite a feat. Combat in this game is two-dimensional. Again, this came out in 1995. I really do like the way they executed combat in this game. It's still active time battle combat like I'm used to, but this is one of the only classic ATB-style games I've played where positioning mattered to certain attacks. Some of Chrono's techs like Cyclone and Wind Blast had hitboxes that could take multiple enemies in a certain area depending on positioning. This eventually did become moot once we got access to strong, full area attacks, but it's still nice that they did that. The boss battles in this game were interesting. For a lot of them, it felt like victory depended less on developing and maintaining good tactics as much as it was that they had a trick, a specific attack that you needed to use on them, which made the difference between a very hard and a very easy encounter. This led to some frustration, most notably against the Golem sisters, when the fight was dramatically harder than it needed to be when I didn't know what the trick was, and I stumbled upon it by pure accident actually in that case. I have an interesting relationship with the side quests in this game. Side quests are a video game staple. Some of them are just small tasks from NPCs, and sometimes they're related to particular playable characters. Depending on the scope and difficulty of the quest, the rewards you get can be substantial, and oftentimes completing side quests can be the difference between a tough final boss fight and a more manageable one. A notable example is The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, in which completing all of the side quests yields the Fierce Deity's Mask, the most OP item in the history of the Zelda franchise. This item can literally turn every boss encounter into a complete joke, including the final boss encounter with Majora. I do have some issues with the way side quests, particularly the Rainbow Shawl quests, are handled in this game though. Firstly, from my experience playing, they actually made the difference between the final boss being playably winnable or not, rather than making it more manageable or not. Especially if you watch my streams, you'd know that I made multiple attempts at the final boss encounters, both before and after reviving Chrono, and I got destroyed 95% of the time. Only one attempt got even close to success, and this was after I'd already had to level grind for a bit for 2 previous boss encounters because Lavos' magic attacks can do massive damage to both Frog and Chrono. It's possible that this was because of the characters I was using. My preferred lineup was Chrono, who is the main character and therefore has to be in, Frog because he's my favorite, and Marle for her amazing healing abilities. From what chat was telling me, Luca and Robo would likely have been better in the finale, but because I hadn't used them, they had hardly any techniques available. So I'd either be level grinding on my current party, or else I'd be ability grinding on characters I hadn't used. So at that point, I may as well do side quests with the characters I'd already invested in. And one of the main things that allowed me to eventually beat Lavos was the Rainbow Shell side quest, which gave me the ultimate magical armor in the form of Rainbow Helms. This allowed me to optimize the rest of my armor to be more physically oriented and was a key turning point for the battle. The other thing is, at least for the Rainbow Shawl quest, is that it felt necessary for the plot as well. Completing it resolved certain plot points, like why the Chancellor was so determined to pervert justice earlier in the game, and also saw the king accept Chrono as a person. This did get retconned out of the ending, but I don't think it should have been, given that Chrono and Marle did get married in the game's aftermath. Seeing Marle and her father reconcile as part of it was also very sweet. But if a quest is going to be that important from a plot, character, and gameplay perspective, then it shouldn't be a side quest. It should be part of the main story, or at least it should be heavily incentivized. The game doesn't do a great job guiding you once you've beaten Dalton, which is when many of the side quests become available, so I wouldn't have even known to complete them if not for Twitch chat. So the only incentive that I have, as someone who's very plot-oriented to complete side quests, is that Lavos was beating me to a pulp, which initially made me resent the whole thing. But then once I started doing the quests, I really enjoyed them, and the ending wouldn't have felt as satisfying without them, especially since the quests that I did mainly concerned Marle and Frog. I care a lot about characters as well, so I really wish the game had done better at incentivizing the quests from a character perspective. In fact, they kinda do the opposite by immediately throwing the Black Omen into your face once you're free to explore. Because after you beat the Black Omen, you stop getting any guidance at all except to revive Chrono, if you haven't done that already. I know that part of the responsibility is on me as a player to find side quests, but it's still frustrating when the game seems to be leading you the wrong direction when, again, the side quests were necessary to even make the game playably winnable. I really think that the ultimate thing with side quests is that you don't have to incentivize them to people who already enjoy exploring. You need to do a better job incentivizing them to people who are like me, who are more plot and character focused, especially since so many side quests involve character anyway. Ultimately though, I really did enjoy Chrono Trigger. I know I was just bashing the way the endgame was designed, and I do think those gripes are valid, but the story, characters, and music were incredibly well written, which are the main things that I look for in games personally. I think I'd definitely enjoy it more if I played it through again. Now that I'm aware of how the combat and endgame are set up, I can focus more on the story aspects and maybe experiment more with characters I didn't use last time, like Luca and Robo. Then, I could see whether Twitch chat was right and using them in the endgame would have helped. So, I might play it again at some point, and I definitely recommend it to all of you watching as well. Before I go, one more thing. I still like to play my little game of give me a fandom and I'll tell you who I would marry, bring back to life, party with, and set on fire. So let's do that for this game as well. For Mary, I'd say Luca. Smart, confident inventor girl, we'd get along pretty well, I think. For bring back to life, I would say Shala from the era of Antiquity. We don't get to see much of her because she appears really late in the game and she dies early after we meet her. But that's just the thing, is that she gets such a bum deal for most of her life and then she dies, so I'd want to give her another chance at life now that her abusive mother is gone. The abusive mother is also the person that I would set on fire. She does die by the end of the game, so that's not necessary, but everyone that we'd want to set on fire dies at the end of the game. So I'd pick her because she deserves it the most. She tries to harness the power of Lavos for no other reason but blind greed, which is so recklessly stupid that she needs to be set on fire. And finally, for a party with, I would say Marl. The folks in prehistory know how to throw an awesome party, though, I will admit that, but Marl with her royal connections could make one that's a bit more refined for my tastes, but also because it's Marl, she'd make it really fun anyway. Alright everyone, that's going to be it for this video. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe, and Lord willing, I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching!